So she's the most protected?
That's right. Kelly is the most protected person. Okay. 皆さんこんにちは。
Hello, everybody.
今日はこの What can you do now and its vision and possibilities. This is in regards to following up the returnees.
英語でやるのに、
あら、今私なんつったはい。まあ、どっちでも。
どっちでもいいんですけど。
はい。よろしくお願いします。
So, which are we doing?
私日本語行きます。
はい、わかりました。よろしくお願いします。We can always switch, but yeah.
皆さん、海外には日本人たくさんいますけれども、日本の人口1億2000万人のうち、海外で住んでいる人は130万人だと言われているんです。
You know what, I should have done my study.
ここはある。
Okay. When it comes to numbers, there's no way. So, there's a lot of Japanese. Did you know that there's 125.7 million? Wow. Overseas.
違う。That's the entire Japanese.
Japanese. Okay, and then 1% of that are here overseas. Thank you.
でも海外に日本人が住んでる場合、他の国の人たちと、特にアメリカに関しては違うのは、他の国の人たちはこっちに来たら永住する、もうこっちに移住してきます。
So the difference between Japanese who go overseas and other people from other countries that go overseas is that the people from other countries generally are going to stay in the country that they visit, come to the United States to stay, but the Japanese will go back to Japan and here temporarily.
でも意外とそのパーセンテージ、私もっと学生だったら多分8割かそれぐらいだと思うんですけど、全体で見たら、60% ぐらいが日本に帰るらしい。
So eventually about 60% go back. I thought it would be more like 80%, but about 60% eventually go back to Japan. So there is a good portion that stay.
で海外で30年住んでたとしても帰る人がいます。
And then of course there are people that might stay overseas for 30 years, but then at the end they're going to go back to Japan as well.
でそれはもう本当に日本語協会でいたら時々言いますけども、リタイアして子供たちが育ったから私たちは日本に帰りますって言って日本に帰る人たち。
So you may experience that a Japanese church here in the United States, they might have been here 30 years at the church and then they say, we're retired now, we're going to go back to Japan.
海外に出るっていうことに関していくつか理由とかあとその動きとかあるんですけれども、そのディアスポラっていうことを考えたときにそれが、非自発的か自発的かっていうのがあります。
Okay, so
ここに書いてある。
I know it's short or for me, my brain just... Okay, so what were you saying? 海外に行くと、いろんな there's a lot of reasons that they go overseas, and so some of them I've been looking at this guy, I forgot what we said. Reasons, right? So they're voluntary, internal, external, and traditional exodus of returnees as well too.
そう、そこまで言ってなかった。
言ってなかったね。ごめん。
大丈夫。
Yeah, better listen, not watch.
そうなんですね。で、例えば戦争があったら、それは非自発的に出なきゃいけないことです。
In other words, there's voluntary and non-voluntary. Those are the words I missed. But like if it's war, it's not voluntary, right? They have to.
で、国の中で動く人もいれば、国外に出る人もいます。
And there are situations where they move within the country, but then there's others that go overseas.
あとはこうレフュージーみたいになって出
Or
る人
become
もいれば、
refugees.
でそのままもう国外にずっと住んでいて、でも帰国する人もいる。
So they might end up as refugees and are out of the country for a while. Some of those will return, maybe some won't, but yeah.
でも日本の人たちは留学あるいはその仕事っていうことで、どちらかというとボランタリーの方ですね、自発的に行く。
But most Japanese are here to study for work or things like that, so they're pretty much voluntary. They may be sent by companies, but it's still voluntary.
で今私たちが話しているその国内の動きではなくて国外の話なんですけれども、でも永久に海外に住むのではなくて帰国する人たちが多い。
But the key is that they're not here forever. They are going to go back as temporary.
でその福音に関して伝統に関して言ってみると、これは毎回私言ってるんですけれども、日本人は海外にいる方が福音に対してオープンです。
And regarding evangelism and the gospel, it's clear that Japanese people are more open to the gospel when they come outside of Japan.
で私は30倍って言うんですけれど、
So 30 times
more オープンするんです。
More open, okay.
で言うんですけど、それよく聞かれます。特にペーパーを書いてる進学生から聞かれます。
So I get asked about my 30 times more by people like who are writing papers if that's really true or not, right? Seminary.
そうでそれで、正直に言いますその時。
And then I get a little more honest at that point.
その30は私が作りましたと正直に言います。
The 30% is just something I kind of came to the conclusion of. That's a better way to say that, right?
でも
I always have to turn it to nice.
でもこの30倍が20倍でもね、10倍でも5倍でも2倍でも私すごいなと思うんです。
But I think it's amazing if it's not 30%, but if it's 20%.
30 times.
I mean 30 times more, if it's not 20 times more, even 10 times more, even 5 times more, even 2 times more, that's still amazing.
でも本当、未知は日本で牧会してなかったからあれだけど、日本でもやってたの？協力牧師の。どうですか？自分の経験から見て、日本と海外で牧会をしてて、なんか違いっていうのは何倍っていうのは言いにくいかもしれないけど、どうですか？
So Pastor Michi, since you have pastored a little bit in Japan and you, of course pastored here, did you sense a difference between the two within Japan or overseas?
30倍は I agree ですね。
でも
You did both English just now, pretty much.
そうでもこの数ね、実はね今言ってたみたいに30っていうのは本当はもうちょっと高かったんですこの数字。
But in reality, it actually, starting to look at it, it turned out to be a little bit more than the 30
だか
times.
ら半分にしたら30になったんですよね。
So she took the number and went half, and that was 30.
でそれでいろんな牧師先生に聞いたらそんなにオフじゃないよって言ってくださったので今も使っています。
And asking around, asking pastors, this is about the right percentage, so that's why she continues to do that.
でもいずれにしろ本当に今さっきのケン先生も言ってくれたけど、それを私が言ったから。
そうそういうのよ。
本当やっぱ海外で日本人宣教っていうのは神様が与えてくださっている素晴らしい機会だと思います。
So I think reaching out to Japanese overseas is an opportunity that the Lord has created for us to be a part of.
で場所によって違います。オレゴンとボストン、カリフォルニア全然違います。
Depends on the place, the situation. Portland, Boston, here in Los Angeles, also there in California.
でもやっぱり日本人が救われて少なからずとも多くの人たちが帰ってます。
And yeah, the pattern is the same. Wherever they are, Japanese people will come to church and be saved, and will go back to Japan.
で私たちはこれも年間1600人の人たちが、海外で福音に触れて、まだ決心をしていないかもしれないけれども心開かれてあるいはイエスの信じで帰るという数字を出しています。
So we think there's about 1,600 people who have come overseas and connected to church, seeds have been planted, some become Christians, maybe not all of them are Christians, but those seeds are planted and go back to Japan every year.
でももう一つの今度は悲しい数字はもしフォローアップがなかったら8割の人たちが 2,3 年のうちに教会から姿を消す。
But here's a sad truth that without follow-up, about 80% of those folks will no longer go to church if they're in Japan or be connected as Christians.
この1600人は学生も入ってるんですか？
学生も入ってます。
もっと多いんじゃないかな。
ね、多いと私も
He
思うんで
wonders
すけ
if
ど。
there should be more than 1,600.
でもこれアメリカだけだから。
This is only America, so this is not worldwide. This is
でも多い。
This is the United States, or is it North America, Canada too, or just the United States?
United States.
Okay, United States. So probably if you include Europe and other places.
Oh, no, just in the US,
Yeah.
多分 JCFN がやってるだけでももっと学生関わってスピーカーになって帰ってるんじゃないかなって気がする。
I reference these stats all the time, and they say, "What's the source of that information?" I say JCFN. I'll give you your name.
That's fine. You can. Yeah. でもこれのその8割の反対があります。
But you have this, the opposite side of this as well too.
これ今言ったのはフォローアップがなかったら8割が消えるっていう。
So the clause that was important there was without follow-up.
でもフォローアップがあったら8割がつながるんです。
But if there's follow-up, 80% will connect to churches in Japan.
でも結局その8割も何年経ってとかいろいろあるんですけど
Of
も。
course, the 80% is dependent on how many years, etc., like that. But
だからあとの残りの2割も15年経ったら戻ってきてるかもしれない。
who knows? The remainder, the last 20% or whatever, they might come back later on because of the seeds that were planted.
そうだからね 100% だと思いたいんですけど、でも そのために私たちは今できることがあるということを話したいと思います。
So of course I'd like to say it's 100%, but it's not quite there probably. But I'm going to tell you what we can do now to make sure that they do connect back to Japan.
で、初めに、帰国者が直面することを私たちが今ここで分かっていたら、そしたらどういうふうにして彼らを整えることができるかということが分かると思います。
So if we know what the people who are returning go through, what it's like for them, then that helps us to prepare them for when they go back.
ちょっとストーリーを聞いていただきたいんです
We
が、
have a story we'd like to hear.
ちょっとこれ古いんですけれども、ともこさんという人の話です。
Tomoko-san, it's a little bit old.
で彼女は、イクイパーコンファレンス、私たちがその帰国する前に帰国者のためにしているコンファレンスの参加者に向けてしたビデオです。
She was it's a video for participants in the EC Equippers Conference that they hold.
1年かかってやっと
ちょっと待ってください。
私が
これって音がオーディオってどこにあるんだサウンドこれだな、こうしてできるね。
私は日本に帰国し1年かかってやっと私が生きていく中で何が一番大切なのかということをもう一度思い起こし考えることができ、自分や世の中の価値観を中心とした生き方ではなく主を中心とした生活をしたい、主とつながっていたいと思い、2009年の2月に転職することを決意しました。仕事をしながら、
ちょっとこれ短くしたバージョンなんですけど、彼女は、仕事をしてて、もう毎朝、早い電車で行って、最後は終電で帰ってくる、そういう毎日の生活だったんですね。
So just a little background, she had been working in Japan and she would go on a morning train and be there till really late at night every day to work.
でも仕事をゲットした時は自分はクリスチャンなので日曜日は働けませんって言ってました。
But when she got work in Japan, she said, I'm a Christian, so I can't work on Sundays.
でそれでもいいよっつって雇われた会社がベンチャー企業だったので、もう大変だと。
So that was the company said it's okay, but it was a venture company, so then it was still very, very tough.
でだからもう教会にはもちろん行けないし、スモールグループとかそういう交わりにも行けなくて、もうしまいにはもう本当に祈れない、聖書も読めないというところで今の状況です。
So because work was so tough, she couldn't go, to church or go to prayer meeting, and it was to the point where she couldn't even really pray on her own as well. So it was tough.
私は日本に帰国し1年かかってやっと私が生きていく中で何が一番大切なのかということをもう一度思い起こし考えることができ、自分や世の中の価値観を中心とした生き方ではなく主を中心とした生活をしたい、主とつながっていたいと思い、2009年の2月に転職することを決意しました。仕事をしながら転職活動をするのは難しかったのですが、次の仕事が決まっていないまま4月で退職することになりました。だから神の国とその義とをまず第一に求めなさい。そうすればそれに加えてこれらのものはすべて与えられます。マタイ6章の33節と聖書にあるように、私が神様につながっていたら主はすべて必要なものを与えてくださると確信を持って祈れるように、そして必要なものが加えられるように祈り始めました。神様は誠実な方で、聖書の言葉通り神様はすごい御業を見せてくださいました。私が希望していた条件をクリアした仕事が与えられ、教会と職場の近くに住むことができ、教会での姉妹たちの交わりが与えられ、帰国前から望んでいた JCFN のスモールグループにも参加できるようになっていったのです。主にあっての兄弟姉妹の交わりに飢えていた私は、スモールグループに参加できるようになって、本当に毎週その日が来るのが楽しみで仕方ありませんでした。以前はなかなか自然に自分の信仰生活を話すことができる環境がなく、戸惑い悲しかったのですが、主の日に出してくださる御業や恵みをシェアでき、共に祈り合えるスモールグループでの時間は日本での 私の信仰生活をさらに強めていきました。日本に帰ってきてもう少しで3年経とうとしています。3年前は私も今皆さんが座っている席にいた一人でした。まだクリスチャンになって間もないアメリカにいた頃は、神様が私を守ってくださるように仲間を、そして導いてくださる先輩クリスチャンを私の周りに与えてくださり、南カリフォルニアで行われたいろいろな活動を通して神様に近づけるように成長してくださいました。しかし日本に帰ってきてから本当に孤独を味わいながら、仲間の手を取って共にではなく、自分で真正面から神様に向き合っていたと思います。その中で主につながっていることの大切さ、キリストの体の教会につながっていることの大切さ、共に支え祈り合うことができる仲間の大切さを本当に学ぶことができたと思います。これからも神様の子供として自分らしく輝き、喜びに満ち溢れた神様を愛する日々を過ごすことができるように、神様につながっていきたいと思います。ありがとうございました。
ここからも分かるみたいに、本当に帰国者が直面するっていうのは忙しい日々ですね。
So you can tell from this video that when they go back to Japan as a returnee, they return to a very busy lifestyle.
その中で彼らが 99% 影響を受けるのは聖書からではなくてこの世の影響です。
And at that point, what they experience or what they absorb is 99% of the world, not from Christians.
でそれでも教会にも行けなくなったら本当にそうなってしまうと思うん
And
ですね。
especially if they can't go to church at all, that's what's going to happen.
それが彼女のストーリーでしたけれども、彼女もそうなんですが、その次にもう一つビデオを見てもらうんですけれども、その人は家族からの反対と、また教会の中でもこうつながるのが難しかったっていう話をしているんです。
So I'm going to show another video. That was her experience, but the next one's about a person that had a family who were opposed, as well as a church that didn't quite understand their situation.
一番大切なことは神様を信頼すること。それはあなたが思ったタイミングではなく、神様のタイミングでいい教会が見つかったりとか、いい交わりであることがあると思います。で、本当に目の前に教会来てないとか、その家族に反対されたとか、そういう壁がいろいろ日本に帰ってくると立ちはだかると思うんですけど、でもそのどの時にもやっぱり神の国と神の義を第一に求めているかっていう心にベクトルを合わせて、その常に神様を求めることをやめないでほしいです。そうすれば絶対どんなに少ないクリスチャン人口の日本でもクリスチャンの交わりや礼拝やスモールグループなど、今アメリカとかで受けられているものを絶対あなたが思う形じゃないかもしれないけど、神様が絶対与えてくれるということを信じて毎日。
ちょっと初めの部分がちょっと両方のビデオにちょっと切れててちょっとよくわからないんですけど、彼女は帰った時に、とりあえず家族が反対しました。
So when she went back to Japan, first of all, she had the family didn't understand it and what they had were against
で
it.
彼女は家族はすっごい仲が良かったんですね。
But she was, of course, in a very close family, so that was really, really difficult for her.
だから親は子供のことが心配で仕方がない。
Parents were just so concerned about their child, right?
もうね、やばい宗教に捕まったと思う。
And maybe she got caught into some really bad kind of religion.
で彼女が洗礼を受けたって帰ってきた時にみんながお祝いのカードをくれてたんですね。
So when that she'd been baptized, when she returned, she got for what? For the baptism?
そうそうそう。
From family?
From the church.
Oh, from the church. Okay. So she got congratulations on your baptism card from church people.
でも親は全部それを破ってるんですよ。
But the parents ripped that apart.
でもこれはもう家族会議を開いて、もう引っ越そうっていう話。
So they had like a family meeting. It's like we should just move out of here.
それだけこの親は彼女のことを愛してたんですよね。
So that's how much actually actually she was loved by her parents, but
でも彼女はうまくそれを伝えることもできなかったし、どうしていいかわからない。で、教会に行きます。教会に行ったら親子で教会に来てる友達がいる。
so didn't know how to speak to her parents about that and try to work through that situation. But then when she would try to go to church, then at church there were people that she knew were there as a whole family together.
で、だから友達にクリスチャンの友達にいても分かってもらえないと思っちゃった。
So her Christian friends who were there with the family members probably wouldn't be able to understand my situation was the feeling she was having.
で、海外で救われる人たちの多くは家族、親戚の中でクリスチャンになる第一号が。
Oftentimes the Japanese person becomes a Christian in the States and returns or overseas, they're going to be their first Christian in their family most of the time.
だからそういうこの家族の反対というのは帰国する人たちは、誤解とかですね、それを体験します。
So opposition from family, misunderstandings from family, etc. is a common thing.
で、彼女が、したことはとも子さんと似てますけれども、周りの友達にもなかなか相談できなかったので、行ったところは聖書でした。
So similar to the person before her, but in her case, she really couldn't talk to her friends or anything, so she decided she could only go to the Bible as the source of help.
で、聖書を読んでいく中で交わりが大切だということをもう一回思います。
And through reading scripture, she came to the understanding, of course, how important fellowship is.
で、そしたら周りを見たら彼女のことを理解してくれる友達がいるということに彼女は気づくんですね。
And then because of that, then as she started looking around, she realized that there were friends that could be her family.
で、その友達はもう初めからいた友達でした。
But these were, of course, the friends that were there all the time, but
そう、でも彼女の心が変えられたから信頼することができるようになりま
because her heart was changed, she was able to trust him and rely on him.
す。で、その後、彼女は神様との深い関係の中で、今はお母さんと一緒に教会に行ってます。
And so now, after the deep relationship, fellowship and stuff, she's going to church with her mother.
で、その一番初めの証の子は、彼女は、日本で出会ったアメリカ人と結婚して今シアトルにいます。
And the first person that was on the video, she met a Japanese, a foreign person in Japan, got married, and now they live in Seattle.
Kelly, she's the first one. She's actually the leader at the APU Friday.
へー、すごい。
はい。で、そういういろんな、だから帰国をするってことは、私の中ではそんなに悪いことなんじゃないなっていうふうに思うんですね。
So having to return to Japan, from my thinking, is not a bad thing necessarily at all.
トランジション、今日このレジリエンスの話もしてましたけれども、トランジションっていうのは実は私たちが神様に対して信仰が本当に深まる良い機会でもあると思います。
So in resilience that we talked about yesterday as well, transition is something that the Lord uses for us to grow in our faith and start relying on Him.
今さっきのとも子さんもまた、名前出てこない。もう一人の顔。
はい。
彼女も、その難しいところを通して神様と深く出会っています。
So both of the people that were introduced in those videos went through a difficult time, and that got them closer to God.
で、この神様に信頼するということで、一番私ね、思うんですけれども、帰国をする人の中でその8割、神様から離れるって言いましたよね。
Okay, so I'm thinking, I told you already that about 80% will leave any kind of faith or God when they go back without any follow-up.
そうでもフォローアップしたらつながるけど、でもつながる人たちの中にいくつか特徴があるという気づきました。
So the remainder, of course, will connect of those 8, of the 20, the remaining 20, but they're all a little bit different in the way they connect.
で、その何をやったらその、継続的にいくかって言ったら、まあ一つはね、メンターがいたら継続してつながるなと思います。
So what are ways that they can connect? One is if they have somebody who could be sort of a mentor to them when they go back to Japan, that helps them to connect and stay.
もう一つは帰国する前に信じた後に一回でもいいから試練にあってたら長続きするなと思うんです。
And another interesting thing is once they become a Christian in the States, but then if they have some kind of trial while they're here before they go back to Japan and go through that, that will be helpful for them to connect as well.
なぜかというと、一つ目のこの彼らの試練というのは、イエス様を信じるときに自分の今まで信じてたこと、自分も含めてそれをやめて神様を信じるということですよね。
So when they came to faith while they're overseas, they're basically going away from everything they grew up learning about faith or anything like that and starting anew, right?
で、試練に遭う時も結局最終的には まあ、その試練が何であるかにもよりますけれども、自分が思っていることじゃなくて神様を選ぶところになると思うんです。
And so when they experience a trial after they become a Christian, it's often because they're having to deal with something that's from their past, but they hadn't really worked through before, and trying to decide between that and God.
で、神様を選ぶってことができたら、これは素晴らしい信仰の成長の力
So if they're able to do that in the context of still being overseas and make it through and connect with God, then they're going to be stronger to be able to do that.
なんで海外でやったらいいかって言ったら、海外で信仰に導いてくれた信仰のお父さん、お母さん、お兄ちゃん、姉ちゃんがいるからです。
So the reason because of that is when they go through that, then they have sort of faith parents or faith brothers and sisters that have brought them through that situation.
で、困った時にその話をして、で、その人たちが助けてくれる。
And so being able to converse with them and they can help them through that kind of reliance is important.
それを一回やってから強いんですよね。
So if they've done that once before they return to Japan, they're going to be much stronger when they do
だって
return.
帰ったら彼らはこの帰国っていうこのトランジションを絶対に経験するから。
Because when they return, they will go through this transition of returning.
でももしメンターやそういう人たち、その信仰の友達とそれをすることができていたら、そしたらそのトランジションが来た時に同じように神様を選ぶことができると思うんですね。
So if they've been through that before, if they can find another mentor kind of person or Christians, friends that can support them, if they've experienced that once before, when they do that in Japan, they'll seek out those kinds of folks as well too.
そうだからそれはすごいこっちでできる大切なこと
So
の一
that's
つ
something we can do is help them have trials.
はいでそういうふうに言ってます。
I know it was a joke.
I was gonna ask.
Interpreter should not joke.
これがトランジションのもう本当これは普通に文化のことですけれども、トランジションのこれがステージです。
This is just a cultural example, but this is kind of the stages of transition.
で、このね、ファン、フライト、ファイト、フィットってありますけ
Okay.
ど、
Fun, flight, fit, and fun, flight, fight, and fit.
そうで、ね、海外に出たらハネムーンの時期ですよね。
So when you go overseas, it's a honeymoon period first,
で
right?
もその後にびっくりします。
So then you have surprising, unexpected events.
で、なんでこんなことが起こるんだってなって、
Why are these kinds of things happening to
でも
me?
時間が経ったら、まあ慣れる。
But after a period of time, then get used to it, right?
初め、うわー、道が広いな、アメリカは。
Wow, streets are so wide in America.
なんでこんなに渋滞なんだ、ロスは。
Why does Los Angeles have all these traffic jams?
で、びっくりして、それから怒ります。もういい加減にしろ。
Get mad at Los Angeles for all the traffic jams.
でもまあ仕方がないねってなるわけです。
Oh, but this is the way life is. We'll have to move on.
私がびっくりしたのは、まあそういういろいろびっくりしたのは、ブロッコリーが生だったのがびっくりしました。
The thing that I stumbled upon that I had a hard time with is that broccoli was eaten raw.
でも今は大好きです。
But I love it raw now.
でも今度帰ったら、また同じようにファン、フライト、ファイト、フィットがあるわけです。
Yeah, but in fact, once they return, they experience the same thing back in their home culture. The same exact pattern happens.
で、これで気づくと思うんですけれども、この帰った後のこの線が、まあ、上なのか下なのかこれずれるわけです。
So you might see this line that's going on. The question here is that the line will be in a different place depending on where they're at.
で、ここのファイトもこの帰った時の方がショックが大きいんですよね。
Oh, and then when they return to Japan, actually the shock is bigger, so the line is lower there.
これも本当に宣教師の先生がみんな体験することです。
These are the kinds of things actually that missionaries experience when they go to Japan for the first time. You know, in reverse the fourth
そう
time.
そうね、アメリカから日本に行ってすごい楽しいっつっていろいろ大変だけども慣れて。
Yeah, so they might go from America or someplace and it's fun, and then things happen and they can't get ready.
でも今度はアメリカに戻ってきたらまた同じことを宣教師は体験しますね。
Then they go through all this stuff back in America on home assignment, right? And the kids are worse, so let me tell you.
本当そうだと思うね。でも留学生も駐在員も同じようにこれを体験します。
So students overseas, studying overseas, workers overseas, and their families all go through these kinds of things as well too.
でもこれを見てこの差があっていいんだよって言ってくれたら落ち着くんですよね。
But if you're able to tell them that when you end up down here, it might be in different places. That difference is okay. It's not the worst thing in the world.
そうでこのびっくりするのもなぜこんだけもびっくりするかって言ったら自分は自分の国に帰ってきたんだから言葉もわかるし生活も今までのところに戻るんだから普通だろうと思ってて違うからびっくりする。
So the reason this is lower here is that they speak Japanese, this is their home country, this is where they're originally from, they think everything's going to be the same. They go and it's not the same, so the gap, the flight to fight kind of thing is greater than when they first went overseas.
プラスクリスチャンになっちゃった。
And then on top of that, they became Christians.
全然そしたらもうこのストーリーは変わるわけです。
So then the story changes much more.
でもこのプロセスを私たちが知っていて彼らがこれを通るっていうのが分かってたら事前にあるいはそれを通ってる時に助けを提供することができる。
So if those of us who are ministering to them here are aware of these kinds of things, can help prepare them before or during the process of this, then we're able to help them transition back to Japan.
ということでそれで何ができるかっていう話をちょっとしていきたいと思います。
So what can we do?
皆さんが今こうミニストリーを、されようとしているっていう人はどういう人たちでしょう。
What kinds of people are planning to or going through planning to do ministry among Japanese?
大きく私が考えたのは、学生と駐在かなと思い
Well,
ました。
who you're going to work with? Probably big categories are students and then workers.
やってらっしゃるのは旅行者もそうですね。
Tourists as well too.
ホームステイプログラム。
Homestay program, okay, yeah.
で、帰るときに彼らは霊的に興味が全くないっていう人からすごく求めてるっていう人から、新しく信じたっていう人まで。
So within these, there are people that have no interest when they go back to Japan. You have some who are still seekers. You have some who are new believers when they go back to Japan. Different categories.
でだからこの彼らがどういう人かということでどう帰国を準備するかっていうのは変わってくると思います。
I do think it's important to know where the people are at this point because the way you prepare them will change with each category.
これ見せて。ということでちょっと近くの人とグループになってじゃあ今までの皆さんの経験も教えてほしいんですけれども帰る前に、どういうヘルプをすることができるかしてきたか可能性があるかっていうのをちょっと話してもらっていいですか。
Like you to sort of how many per group or just
もう3でいいじゃない。
3. Oh, yeah, perfect. Yeah. So get into groups of 3. Just talk. What kinds of things can you do to prepare people before they go back to Japan? Just
Can you do or have you done?
もうどれも全部。
Can you do or
Can you do?
done?
Have you done?
Whatever.
What would you do?
What would you do?
Yeah. And I think it would be helpful if you're able to kind of categorize them. Like, okay, I'm thinking about students who are not interested in them. What can you do? So if you can think about more specific towards a specific group of people, that would be interesting. So if you could kind of like set the situation and then talk about that. And you can do multiple situations as well.
だそうです。
特にこの
特にこのグループは。
I was thinking like there's a lady that got me interested in this Japanese. She's been thinking about going back to Japan. But see, this is like my 5th time at RJC. And I learned more and more about the Japanese culture. I was just in
誰にも意見だし、本当にもうこの時点でこの話しか来ない準備する。
And I learned more about the Japanese culture than I learned. So the main thing for me is understanding why I I'm not worried One of them is she wants to be
That's a huge difference. probably as American as she is Japanese.
興味があるのは
She goes back to Japan.
一つした例えばビジネスじゃないけれど私が今までチャンスをしてる人とかそれと同じような働きとか興味とか知ってたらそれが近かったら実はシアトルだけどそういうこと知ってるよねってそういうクリスチャンだけどそれもこの後
コネクションズ
何でもコネクションズだからビジネスだけでもじゃないけどそれぞれのつながりが見つけて
So the next time Japanese serving Japanese Japanese works for this year. They only come for about 1 year. Yeah. No. And the companies will choose Japanese companies like Casey They call the millions like that. They bring and they work very hard. So we can be the 1 or 2 days a week that they have off to be able to have them So far, none have come to Christ with us. They've come to church, come to Bible studies, things like that. But we are still trying to figure out what to do, especially in such a short amount of time and such a short amount of attention.
地域的に同窓会したり、クリスチャン、移動したり、移動した人たちをやってるって感じでやってる人は集まるんだよね。教会ってなってもさ、それが知りかけてまた、その時にビジネスとして実際に紹介すること実際が残念だけど
In second level ministry, that maybe get started when they find mentors. So anyone can go to the website to get a mentor in this town. They'll make a connection to the town or someone online can mentor them, help them to get into a church and deal with their struggles of being in a church, maybe not being welcome, not used to the music style, something like that. Just to keep them motivated, they get some traction and become local in a church. Yeah, please.
どうですか？何かシェアしてもらえませんか？
How is it? Is there any ideas you can share with us?
このグループからなんか。
How about from this group here?
We're still trying to figure it out.
Still trying to what?
Figure it out.
Figure it out.
Apparently I didn't. What I shared with our ministry to the Japanese who work in Walt Disney World, we only have 1 year with them, and so far none of them have come to Christ. Done Bible studies from the Japanese church. Thankfully, there's one Japanese church in Florida, and it's in Orlando. And we keep in touch even after the pandemic. We still keep in touch with a lot of them over line. I was talking about how second level has the mentor program. So if you know someone who needs, who goes back to Japan, second level can find a mentor for them, maybe in their hometown, but if not, then at least online. Keep them floating until they can find a church family and get some traction and keep growing. Somebody to mentor them close by.
So you even mentor those who are not Christians.
So yeah, second level's policy is mentor and even disciple starts before they come to Christ. So yeah.
日本そのつもりで聞いてなかったからすみません。まあディズニーの方で There are people that work at Disney, right?
1
年間だけ日本人がディズニーで働いて日本に帰るオーランドですからね、そういう人たちに対してもバイブルスタディとかやってたりしていますけれども、まあ、メンターをつけたりするとやはり大切だって、セカンドレベルの時にそのメンターをつける、ディサイプルシップの中でもクリスチャンの前からつけるっていうのを心がけてますね。
そのグループは何かありますか？
僕はね、ベースは日本なんですけれども、僕もセカンドレベル大好きです、その方法がね。僕も弟子増殖の働きをしてまして、DMM、デサコメイキング。
So, his primary ministry is in Japan, and it's disciple making ministries, and so he likes the second level materials. ごめんなさい。
で僕は東京バプテスト教会のメンバーで子ども教会を担当している時があるんですね。
So he's part of Tokyo Baptist Church, and he's especially in charge of the children's program.
で、ユーミンさんとお話してて、ここで子どもたちに福音をね伝えて、そしてハンドベルのねミニストリーとかやってるけれども、そこで伝えるんだけども、しっかり福音を自分のものにしてるかどうかっていうところがあって。
So talking about Yumi-san too, that with working with children, and she does handles. How much do they really understand about faith, and whether that faith is really something that they have grasped or not is an issue.
そしてその弟子増殖の働きをやっている人間として、やはりイエス様中心、もう福音中心、イエス様の従順でいることの大切さをやっぱ教えているんですね。
So to make sure with the kids even that Jesus is centered, the gospel is centered, and then following Jesus. Obeying Jesus, if you will, would be are important things to make sure that they're understanding.
だから福音を自分のものにして人に語るということができないと、まずそこをスタートラインに立ったことにならないと思います。
And until you get to a point where you not just receive the gospel, but then are also able to tell others about it, you haven't really reached the level where that it's really going to make any effect.
第2コリント5章17から21節で、その17節では申請される renew、そして20節では ambassador っていうね、施設になるって書いてますね。
So in 2 Corinthians, Paul talks about being renewed, and then shortly after you're now ambassadors. So you need both of those together.
そうですね。だから声の裏と表、これは切り離せない関係ですね。
So that's like the face and the tail of a coin. You can't take it away.
だからただサンティフィケーションだけをね、成果だけを求めて、そして伝えないということはできない。
So just hoping for sanctification, but not telling anybody, that's not the right way to go.
そこを徹底的に教えて、でもね、子供って伝道できるようになったら喜びを覚えてどんどん証しするんですよ。
So when you start training kids to do that, and they start telling their friends, and their friends come to church and become Christians, then they get joyful, and they want to do it more, and they get out there and excited about it.
それも大人も一緒です。
And actually, adults are the same too.
それをシェアしています。
ありがとうございます。このグループは
Here.
We talked a lot about just the right handoff versus the not so good handoff, because we feel like there's a lot of ways you could send a friend back, whether they're interested, a secret, or a new believer. You can just kind of say, okay, I have a friend over in Tokyo, why don't you give them a call, okay, bye, and then just kind of think like you did your due diligence. Whereas there's a good handoff of maybe like Kenneth was saying, what if you could try to meet with that person online before they go back? What if you could show them a whole community of people so they don't have that fear? Because like the pastor shared this morning, he was so fearful to walk in the church door alone, but the minute he had a friend with him, different picture.
Right.
And if you have someone that you're actually vaguely or hopefully more familiar with, the fear level goes way down to try to pursue any further. But sometimes you just feel like, okay, well, out of sight, out of mind, and you just feel like you can't get them off. Sorry. Do the short version.
どうやって送り出すかっていうのすごく大切だと思うし、誰にバトンタッチするかっていうのもちゃんと良い相手にね、その人を送ることができるってすごい貴重なものであるということ
本当
That
に今
was
の
the digest version.
そうでも今ティムが言ってくれたそのセカンドレベルのメンタリティというかそのポリシーっていうんだけど、そのクリスチャンになる前からメンタリングで仕組んでっていうのができたら素晴らしいなと思い
Of
ます。
course, what Tim mentioned about even before they're Christians to start this mentorship kind of a thing for them, that's going to be really successful down the road.
でそれね同じことを多分ペクさんも言ってるっていうか、その本当子供に対してのその自分のことを話すことができる大人もそれができたらそれ
And
も
this
素
is
晴らしい。
kind of what Texan was saying too, that if you get the children to a point where they not just believe, but they're able to talk about it to others and tell others, that's a similar kind of thing, pretty close concept.
で、今私たちがまあできることってもう当たり前のことですけど、まあ、祈ることができます。
What can we do now? Well, first of all, it's kind of obvious we can pray.
でケネスが言ってくれた、ズームで今からつながることを練習する、彼らが帰る前にね。
So, like we said, connect them now if you can, and even by Zoom or something like that, connect them before they go back, so they have already sort of met them online beforehand.
そうそう。でもそれはなんていうのかな、まだ日本の人っていうか自分たちだけで。
Oh,
そう
okay.
でもなんかズームをすることになれる。
Okay, so they should get used to using Zoom and stuff like that.
ね、Facebook メッセンジャーとか何でもいいんだけど、
I know, yeah.
そのオンラインで話そうって言って OK って言って話せるそういう関係を作るっていうの
So
は。
build that kind of relationship where you can interact through social media.
で、あとはね、ここには英会話をやってるところはあんまりないのかもしれないけども、その英会話を通してリーチアウトしてる人には、日本で英会話をやってる教会を探すんですよ。
So if you have an English conversation ministry here, connect them to an English conversation, a church with an English conversation ministry in Japan as well too, because they will probably want to continue that.
で全然クリスチャニティはいいけれど全然興味ないので英語ありますっていう人、TBC に行きます。
So if people are saying, I'm not interested in Christianity, but I still want to learn English, we'll send them to TBC, Tokyo Baptist Church.
まあその後教会紹介も入りますね。
Right, and of course, there's another thing to do is introduce them to actual churches as well.
あとはクリスチャンを紹介する。
Or introduce them to
いろんな方法があります。今さっきケン先生がとてもケン先生のポジションだからできることかもしれないけれども言ってくれました。
Okay, so Ken just said something because maybe he can only do because of his position. What position is that?
牧師として。
Oh, as a pastor, okay.
で例えばもうね先生はもう今まで20何年
I think it's 28なの。
わやばい。
28
年間牧会していて、もう帰った人が何百人もいるわけですよ。
So 28 years we have, hundreds of people that are on there.
でそれでケン先生は全員知ってる。
大体。
で帰る人がいたらどこに帰ってるかも知ってるからその人とつなげることができる。
So when people go back to Japan from Boston, we have people in Japan that have been part of our ministry in the past, and so we know where they are. So if we know where these people are going, if we have an alumni, we call them alumni when they leave. We say you're a doso. So it's a relationship doesn't end here. When the relationship continues, and we're a big family, right? If they're in Fukuoka and we know somebody going to Fukuoka from our BJCC, we'll connect them. And even if they're 10 years apart, the connection of BJCC, Boston Baptist Christian Church, and especially Debbie and I, because we've been there all 28 years, that's enough of a spark. And, oh, yeah, they were doing this in BJCC back then. Oh, they're doing it still now, that kind of stuff. It just brings back. Well, I never had hair before, but yeah, it's gotten whiter. My wife says shave the sideways would be better. Anyway, yeah, so yeah. So it changed from Debbie being Boston's sister to Boston Mama. So we don't want to go any farther.
でももうね、ババって時期になったからね。でもそうやってそのクリスチャンの紹介をパーソナルにできるのがすごく強いこと。
To build those relationships with other Christians where there's a connection, making a connection, that's really important too.
で、それで
But I'll just throw this. Just introducing churches is okay, but if you can have a connection with somebody that knows you to take to their church, that's a double whammy from my standpoint.
本当その通りだ。で、それをするために、でもみんながみんな知ってるわけじゃないです。ないじゃないですか。
But they don't all know each other, right?
だから、Zoom コネクトっていうのを JCFM で今やろうと努力しています。
So then you can do Zoom Connect. That's what our alumni gatherings in Japan were, and we've done at least one alumni gathering since COVID, so people all over the world were connecting through that.
その例えばボストンの教会につながってる人はいい。
It's okay for people in one that were connected at one church, right?
でもね、 つながってない人たちもたくさんいますよね。
So there are others that aren't now connected to one church.
例えばテネシーで、留学生伝道をしているスタッフが私に連絡をしてきます。
So somebody who's doing ministry to students, staff member in Tennessee contacts her.
で、日本人の子が教会に興味を持ってるから帰る。
So a Japanese person is going to go back to Japan and interested in church.
今まで教会にも毎週来てた。
Was coming to our church every week.
で、多分聖書にも興味がある。
Probably has interest in the Bible as well.
そこら辺がちょっとわからない。
But we're not sure.
ですよね。ポライトに言ってるだけかもしれないからちょっとわからないです。
Yeah, or they may just be coming because of they're being polite, but
だからそこのところを知るためにも、今さっきケネスが言ってるみたいに帰る前にズームでつながるんですね。
so then the important thing is so those kinds of situations is you don't know, try to connect by Zoom before they return to Japan.
だから私たちはそのテネシーのインターナショナルスチューデントミニストリーの人とまずズームをして友達になります。まあ友達になりますね。
So first of all, people that are working in Tennessee will become friends with them, connect them.
で、私たちと友達になってその帰る人を友達として紹介してもらいます。
So then we'll have them introduce us as friends to them.
で、それでいろいろ話をしてたら、まあ、日本語でクリスチャンの人と喋るのが初めてなんです、この頃。
So in this situation, the ministry is in English then.
そう、彼らは、そう。
Okay, so in this case, the original ministry was English only. So this is the first time they're meeting a Japanese person through Zoom who happens to be a Christian.
で、そこでいろいろ話をする中で、私の友達が日本にいるからって、まだ全然テネシーから出てないけど、彼女に、帰るのを東京のどこそこっていうのを聞いといて、そこのクリスチャンの人で、全然この人は興味なかったら、英語の人を紹介します。興味があるんだったら、日本語の人を紹介します。
So Tennessee people, their contact Setsu meets this person as a friend, find out where they're going back to Japan and what their interests are. If they're Christians already, then find a church or Christian in Japan that they can connect to when they return. If they're not Christians, find an ESL ministry to send them to make that connection there.
でも今そのね、ネットができたのがすごくいいなと思うのは、送り出す人と受け入れる人とこの帰る人が一緒のプラットフォームで同時に話ができる。
So the one great thing about the internet right now is that you can have the person who's about to leave and the person that you want to connect them to, and then you yourself, the connector, can all three meet each other online first before anything happens.
そう、だから帰る前にそれをやってたら強いんです。
So when you can do that before they go back to Japan, that's real strength.
だからそれをやっぱりこう努力するのが一つ大切かなと思います。
So trying to do these kinds of things I think are important.
To ask a question.
Yeah.
How many people a year do you get contacted to help in this way?
In this way, well, the person who's contacting us have no idea that's something that they can do. So this person that was contacting me from Tennessee, they just said, well, my friend is going back. Can you help me? So I said, well, you can help her by helping us. So we start to dialogue. So we actually are training those who are going, those who are sending them back. How many cases? A couple hundred.
A year.
Yeah.
Do I need to do that in Japanese? Or? 大丈夫ですよ。日本語ですよ。はい。まあだから。
でも not everybody is like that. So we would say, somebody would say, well, I have friends of friends who's going back to Tokyo. Can you help me? Tokyo, どこみたいな。So we would say, okay, so tell me the nearest train station. I mean, it's kind of rude to ask, give me your friend's address, right? So the nearest train station would help, if not the city. Then we don't hear back from them. Sometimes we don't hear back from them. So we have been learning that's the case. So we just tell them, we have no idea where in Tokyo they're going back. But then we just list out a couple of the churches. We need your friends, whereabouts in Tokyo. Because it's just like you're saying somebody's going back to California.
Yeah.
It's,
More than that.
So we would ask them, but they might not return the email to us. So we'll just say, those are the churches, but we really need your, but sometimes we because then it was friends. So,
yeah, friends.
So including that's about 200. But for those close relationships that we can actually do all the way to Zoom Connect is maybe a handful. Yeah, so we really are trying to promote this Zoom Connect, that we really do want to connect them before they go back. And we really do want to partner with Japanese-speaking churches because they also have their own network of returnees. はい。ということで、yeah. And then we also, if they are Christians, we give them this
クリスチャンだったらこのパケットを渡します。
応援キット、本当だ、はい、応援キットを出します。で、これがちょっと考えたやつだったんですけど、何ができるかっていう表ですね。
So this is kind of a chart of what can we do.
で、もちろん興味がない人でもシーカーズでもクリスチャンでもみんなのために帰るとき
You can pray for all three types of returnees, right?
で、彼らと Zoom であなたがつながることはできます。
And you can connect them through Zoom. Yourself can connect them with Zoom.
で、全然興味がないけど英語に興味があるって人は英会話を紹介することもできる。
So if they aren't interested in this side, but they're interested in ESL, you can introduce them to ESL things, right?
で、このね、英会話の教室が、まあ、教会だったらいいし、宣教師でもいいんですけれども、まあ、弓道中の人には教会の紹介します。
So if it was an English program in a church or by a missionary, that's helpful. But if they're Christians, then we can introduce them to a church.
で、その後に今言ってた、そのクリスチャンの人とつなげる、これが Zoom コネクトということでちょっとまとめてしまいましたけども。
So then you can also then connect through Zoom with them before they go as well as after they go.
で、その今さっきもケン先生言ってくれましたけれども、教会は Google さんが教えてくれます。
Churches you can find on Google.
で、まあもちろんやばい教会もある
Whether
んですけどね。
they're returning friendly, we don't know.
まあそれはわからないですけど。そうそうそう。
Because some churches they might exist, but hard to get into.
で、some churches are not really like Latter-day Saints とかなったら、おっ、本当それもすごい大きい。そうでも帰る前に今言ってたそのファーストレベル、セカンドレベルのこともそうだけれども、メンターシップを持つディサイプルシップをするってことが帰国前にできたらいいなと。
Before they go back, if you can do a mentorship kind of program, that's going to be more helpful.
はい。
I want to share. So I think by September, in September we're going to have the JCE7, the conference in Japan. By that time,
Japan Evangelical Congress.
yes. And by that time, an online app called Coverage will I think will be in service. And this app, you can locate all the churches in all Japan, search it, and even see the coverage of Christian, the UPGs in Japan, the unreached people's group in Japan, unreached people areas.
へー。
Yeah.
それってカームがやってるやつですか？カームっていう団体がやってるやつですか？
カームかな。OM の近藤健二さんがやってるんですけど、あとでシェアします。
Yeah, so I can't remember if you were speaking Japanese or English.
で、ちょっとリソースだけをちょっと紹介しますけれど
So
も、
I'll just introduce the resource of this kit for returning back to Japan.
これはクリスチャンになった学生が対象のツールです
It's
ね。
important to recognize that this is made primarily for Christian students who became Christians while they were here. That's what the target is for this.
今これの駐在版を作ってます。
So we're working on a workers version at this point.
で、その駐在のバージョンには帰国子女の子供たちをどうするかということも含まれてい
And
ます。
in that one it includes more things like what do you do with the children when they were returning back to Japan with you as a family.
あるいは片親だけがクリスチャン、自分だけがクリスチャンで、伴侶がクリスチャンじゃないっていうそういう質問も取り。
Or of course if only one of the people are Christians, the parents are Christians, what do you do kind of thing as well too.
今それが8割ぐらい。
Of course that's really the most prominent one.
で、あともう一つ今イギリスの団体と協力しながら、伝道用の帰国者ワークブックを作ってます。
And we're working with an organization in England right now about an evangelistic kind of a kit for people going back to
そ
Japan.
の逆カルチャーショックを通してバイブルスタディをしながらイエス様と出会うようなの。
So those who are experiencing reverse, culture shock, Bible studies to help them through that. So
To
evangelize to them, yeah.
でもこれは今言ってくださったこの、家族に伝道することができる証を書いたりとかそういう具体的なものも 入ってます。
So this has like testimonies and stuff like that that help
そうそうそう。
others, their experiences already will help.
で神様が共にいてくださるってことも、どのような状況の中でも分かるようにっていうことを取り上げたり、
And it includes things like God is going to be with us throughout these kinds of different circumstances.
であとはその会社で飲み会で飲んでいいのか悪いのか。
Like cultural questions like is it okay if it's a company drinking time whether you can drink or can't drink?
そうであと教会につながるってことはどういうことか。
What does it mean to connect to a church in Japan?
でこの帰国者ワークブック2はそれのいろんな読み切りのエッセイが書かれています。
So the second booklet is different experiences that you can read about.
クリスチャンになって、先祖崇拝を家族とする
Yeah,
ど
so
うした
some
らい
of
い
the
か。
cultural things. What about the ancestor box and things like that?
社会人になるけれども働くってことはクリスチャンとしてどういう意味なのか。
So you're going to become part of the workforce, and what does it mean to be a Christian worker in Japan?
あと占い、日本は占いがたくさんありますけども、
Fortune
その
telling
ことに
Japanese are really into fortune telling. What do you do about that?
でもその冠婚葬祭とかに関してはこうすべきだとかいうことを書いてるわけじゃない。
So we're not trying to say you absolutely have to do it this way regarding, for instance, the Buddhist ancestor box.
いろんな意味でその、教会によって違う
That
か
helps.
ら、
Yeah.
だからその考え方っていうのを紹介しています。
So different churches kind of have different views on that too. So we don't want to be like.
でこれは、そのリバースカルチャーショックに合わせたデボーション。
So devotion that's based on reverse culture shock.
これはですね、帰国者が通った人のその人の、失敗談を漫画にしたものです。
So this is like a cartoon version of a returnee and all the failures, the problems that they have.
でここにあるのは全部日本語ですけれども、英語が全部ダウンロードできるようになっています。
So these are all in Japanese, but you can actually have English version of this to download.
でこれも、JCFN のホームページにもうすぐ載ると思うんですけれども、役に立つリソースがダーッと書かれてい
So
ます。
this will pretty soon be on the JCFN homepage, but these are resources that will be helpful.
そうアルファコースとか、
Alpha course,
聞くドラマ聖書。
Kudonomase.
で、あと子供の聖書アプリとか CGN テレビとか、いろんなデボーションとかリソースが書いてあります。そうだからなんかそういうのもぜひ用いてくださったかなと思います。
So please use these materials as well.
で、次に皆さんにしたいのは、皆さんとしたいのはそのビジョンですね。じゃあ、こっちで救われた人たちが帰ったら、皆さんは彼らにどういうふうなビジョンを神様が持っていると思いますか？
So, for those who go back to Japan, what kind of vision do you think God has for them?
それが自分も含めて。
And for us as we're sending them.
そうっていうのは、私たちが彼らと使えることができている、特権がね、与えられていると思うんですね。
So we have this opportunity or responsibility in a sense, it's a privilege to be preparing them and also be ready to send them.
で私いつも思うんですけど、その今さっきのね、1600人って言いましたよね。
So we said 1,600 people
で
per year.
アメリカは30倍って言いましたよね。
And I said America is like maybe 30 times the numbers.
でも、ただ人数を増やすためだけなのか、
Is it really just
人数のためだけなのか、
is it really just to raise the numbers, or is it just for how many people? Is that what's most important?
でもこの30年私もやってますけど、
And I've been working for 30 years.
でも 1% 変わってない。
But the 1% in Japan hasn't changed, right, during those 30 years.
何なんだ
Why is that? Why is that?
そうだからなんかみんなでちょっとその帰国者に神様が持ってるなんかビジョン、これはね、なんていうのかな、みんなで分かち合うっていうよりも私が励まされたりとか。
So this is now maybe for me to get encouraged, I don't know, but I want to find out what kind of vision all of us have towards what God might want us to be thinking about in terms of when.
もちろんね、日本のリバイバルですよ。
Of course, the revival of
でも
Japan.
なんか具体的に何かあったらちょっとブレインストーミングをしてほしいなと
But
思い
in
ます。
practical ways, if you can brainstorm again with your groups, although we lost texts on, but
はい。
yeah.
じゃあちょっとグループに分かれて、はい、やってください。そのビジョンどういうもの
What kind of practical vision might you have for returnees to
Should we do 2 groups of 4 then?
Sure.
いやそこの2人こっちに来てもらって、でこっちでじゃあ。Okay, so those four, and then you wanna join here.
Well, Alana, you'll join these 3, and then those 2 will join those 2.
Or that a Japanese Baptist church.
Thinking about like mental health and
帰国者に対して
We only go once a month. It's a little bit far for us to go weekly.
I do like I'm part of this recovery for celebrate recovery. So lots of issues, but it's hard to reach.
まあもちろん
It's
だ
hard
け
to
ど
go on. I was gonna say this might be a little subject,
Like
so
step out
そ
of
れは
denial or like
一つの
asking
答えなん
yourself.
だけど、
Yeah.
一応神様の召し方
And
があ
one thing that I noticed when I got a client is all the different
なかなかですね、教会で活動してる方
I went through it
now in
too.
this organization
もうそのね、海外を経験したいっていう
that are going to try
何かある
to
のずーっと思うんです
I don't know, like a big like
まあ
the
何
Japanese
か
nation
がいるのだけど
problem, you know, there's so
and
like
and then she just say the number is still 1%.
men need to
なんだろうな
And
support each other and help each other.
so I feel
I need a lot
like
of
so
help.
I feel like God has raised up
Such a tough exterior.
is raising up even more of an army.
全然インターナショナルインターノミネーション
Yeah, but the people I like help out, there's like Japanese speakers that like run like a
そう
recovery
いう業界って
I have a feeling that works with the Navajo
文字で
nation.
全然それはまあ
And he worked
そ
for
れはね
18 years.
それはまあリーダーたち
まあでもそれ
が
はね、少しは変わってきたんだよね
And that kind of dedication is what I see in people that are trying to work with the Japanese. It would be easy to say, well, if it's only 1%, that's it.
Well, one of the interesting challenges is that
今日は関係なくですよ
these RJC people are mostly focused on reaching Japanese who are
大阪
abroad.
都会の教会
A Japanese person who's willing to go overseas is more willing to try something that's foreign.
ビジョン
And
が
Christianity is seen as a foreign thing. So they're more likely to give it a chance. There's also what it
は終電でしょ
saying in Japan.
In the city
So when they come to America, it's okay to kind of be like an American. And Americans are considered Christian to Japanese. So they say, well, I'm here, I can try being Christian because I'm going to try American culture. So, but then we see that when they return to Japan, 80% of them don't get follow up. Even if they've come to Christ and even if they were baptized, they stop being in fellowship with the believers. That means they're not growing. They're not sharing their faith in that the numbers we're seeing
Every
many
week
that it seems like should be bigger than it's not happening. People go to a church where the
This is like every week you try to give them like this kind of like
and then if
self-worth
they
or like value
this is
themselves or
ownership.
love themselves.
This is
It's
not
crazy.
this is not for
He
us.
knows that.
In the rural towns, you're going to have a
We're
Japanese
raised to
person
believe that they're
who wants
great or
to sing
they're
in English
precious.
at all.
まあもし大阪
Value,
そう
you know, like
They'll come to a church and say it smells like butter, it smells Western.
まあ僕たちは
So that's not for us Japanese. So I think that
今はまだいろんな
what we probably need to do is help or is stop forcing people to push their way into the way of Japanese expression of worship to God. So that Japanese are free, they see there's a freedom to follow Jesus as a Japanese person. Otherwise they're kind of giving up to
吸収
Japanese
できるから
to become Christian.
That's so heavy, that's like touching right what we were talking about.
大体失敗するとまた別だけど
That's why they I've done a lot of work with Indians here, and that's why they feel it. Is that's the white man.
I don't know.
That's I think the way we were able to approach it.
Yeah, well, I think
Some
that's
white versus
even here it's more trendy, like mental health issues.
I really like it.
Yeah,
You can see how bad,
Well, you know, not necessarily okay in that, but you're taking the values that they have and saying, that's what I believe that way,
to have everyone be like,
you know, I don't think people that they want to meet it, but they have this kind of read this track
まあ
and
蜂の働きでしょうけどさ過去に
so to
言ってた人
think
たち
that
もいるけど
there's nothing
場合によって
wrong
は
with that in that sense, but
日本で
but to me, when I look at it, people,
対象
First
って
thing I
いう
do
の
is
は
find
あり
out
得ると思うんだよね。
what
結局
what their needs are, what they're like, what are their
渡ってる経験があるか
and
ら、
I almost always create for them as
In
the
Japan, I don't know
自
how.
分の一部を体験するものとして、
I
経
want
営
to
者
force
として
them
発揮するように学生たちが入ってくるんじゃないかと思ったんですけど、
Well, they're never going to ask you that if your first thing is attack.
When you typically go
国際
that
協会
route.
が
Anyway,
そう
I
だ
just,
ね。
I just,
国際協会を通して学生たち
Statistically, yeah.
I'm talking about the vision seeing the church
I mean,
in
it's
Japan
serious.
そういう業界で
in what
話
that
も
would
聞
look
we
like.
should treat
い
it
アメリカ人のないし、
seriously, like,
Share some ideas.
Yeah.
You're in the ground, right?
そうでし
So,
ょ
how you define
チャ
church?
ージたちもいるでしょ
Yeah.
だからそれは
It's gonna be like a building buildings or building a building.
mhm.
So, yeah.
でも、なんかわかる、もっとできるはずなんだけど、それがなかったら、
そう
なんだろうな。
何を感想してるの
Do they have that like right there? That's
So
what
like,
I was right. We have to do that.
I lost.
They're trying
Yeah.
to take away that stigma of it. And let people know like it's okay, you know, yeah, we gotta start somewhere. I feel like it's not just that.
次の人がリーダーとして
Online, a phone.
当たり前でどんどんどんどん次リーダー
I'm
して
surprised that the statistics came out last week from Japan about religion. And Christianity is the only religion growing in Japan. Yeah. Even through the pandemic, which people would think you wouldn't go to church
yeah, I
anymore.
saw that.
The Japanese government, I believe, released the numbers from all the religious organizations.
だからそれがメインのことじゃなくて、メインの帰国した人たちの
Oh,
海
really?
外に行くか
That's
ら、
another issue.
Yeah.
弱さをね、ちょっとじゃないですか。この間私、この人が
to destroy.
Or it's difficult is where I think on
クリスチャンらしい教会じゃない教会、許された罪深い人を減らしていくのを、なんか、やっぱり空気を読めない
disasters, yes, through that.
そんなの思いません。
That's how they report it.
なんかできる。いや、
There's
それが
this
自然な
feeling
になる
like
こと
there's
な
a
の
distinction
か、
between
それに
religion
対して
Yeah,
私たちが神様から
faith or the way. Like Shinto is considered a way, not a religion.
I don't hear a lot.
So religion is seen as a problem,
Even on any
especially
you
with
have these
this.
segments of teachers that bullying or like
Even
日
still,
本の
the
教会
numbers
の
went
中
up.
のコミュニケーションっ
there's a
て、
special
I just think
thing
that's
on
amazing.
my church that just
Group
talks about
even
bullying
with
stories.
それ
And
で
there,
I used to
most
get
Japanese
bullied,
have a
you
sense
know,
of,
そこで何かできる
and it's just like a regular thing.
they're aware that religion is not a religion, that you have communication that's not actually Christian.
で、まあ、
But there is
ゼ
still
ロ
a
で
fear of association.
Realize
You don't want to be, you don't want your boss to think that you might
何パーセント
do
は
something crazy.
バックスを開けたっていうのが基準で、そういう日本語宣伝が一つの宣伝がそれぞれ数えてる。
We're the ones like the hospital.
What is the science teachers? What is the science?
バックドアめちゃくちゃ開いてる。つまり、バックスマンで記録されていて、そのすごい人たちの
Here, that's how
Absolutely.
3分の1に近い
Now, I do hear Bibles from people because that kind of seems kind of sketchy, like why is it Asian church you have to
よ
buy
その
these
業界
expensive
に
Bibles?
もうじゃあ出していいんだっていう感じになっちゃって、だから、
Why is it so expensive?
I love
But
NHK.
so I wish
I think
that
Japanese news is so much
but another method of explanation for like it's a little long term, but it's what Pastor did. He's looking at 8 children.
It's better than ours.
Christians, Japanese Christians have many children. Eventually, the whole country will be Christian.
Well, I'm not sure how to especially for the older
Do they have to feel like they have to earn the
There might be some obligation concerns, especially if they know how much it costs.
だからこそ、
really hard
日
to
本の
get
教
that
会
system.
で
I was bringing that
Okay,
system.
you can
開発はと実績者
Yeah. They can just send you to go work.
It sounds like a lot of great discussions are happening. Can you have just like one idea you might have had from each group?
Great.
Great for the Japanese. Back to the basics.
I suggested that Japanese families have more children, like.
他にないのあります。
More children.
More children.
Like they don't say 8 kids. Or
8
8
kids.
That's incredible.
This group, what did you guys talk about?
Talked about a lot, like about like mental health. Like there's so much that we can do in that area. Like bullying is like a regular feature on NHK, and like what do you say, like work, like where the husband is sent away for work. That's yeah, I didn't realize.
Big
that.
anti-fan of that in my prayer life. Yeah.
Like addiction, so I do a lot of like recovery stuff. I dealt with addiction too, and so I think that within men it's really a big issue. I feel like calling to help in that area.
And like suicide, sure.
Yeah, suicide for sure. Yeah. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to like just as Christians to like help. It's like just like talking. Yeah, it's great.
私の知り合いがビジョンを見ました。
My friend had a vision.
神様の手が日本の地に行って、それをそこから砂を取るんですね。
It was a vision that God's hand was over the country of Japan and was grabbing the sand
それを海外に落とします。
and dropping it overseas.
そしたらその砂が塩に変わります。
And the sand changes to salt.
その塩をもっぺん神様が集め
And
て、
God gathers that salt,
でそれで日本にパラパラパラ。
throws it over the country.
なんかそれが本当に神様の一つのビジョンかなと思うん
I
です。
think that might be one vision.
でも今ケン先生と話してて思ったのが、もっとなんかねあると思うんですよ。
We both were talking that there's something else that that could be there that
今みんなが言ったそのエリアにも多分届くことなのかなと思い
and
ま
maybe
す。
these are things that can reach into some of the areas that you had discussed here.
日本人がわざわざ海外に来てクリスチャンになる。
So Japanese came to overseas and became a Christian, and that was intentional, God's choice, right?
でそれがまあ異文化でなってるわけですよ
So
ね。
they become a Christian in a foreign land.
で異文化で神様に出会って今度異文化から自分の国に帰る。
So from a foreign land and becoming a Christian in that foreign land, they're going back to Japan.
で日本っていうのはホモジニアスな
And
国
of
です
course,
よね。
Japan is homogeneous, right?
でもそこで異文化を体験して異文化の中で親切にされてイエス様に出会っている人たちっていうのは違いを受け入れることができるんじゃないかなと思うんです。
So when people are saved overseas and go back to Japan, they're people that are more flexible. They can respond to change better.
で例えばその教会の中で、まあ、日本人真面目ですからクリスチャンらしくするのは上手です。
They're Japan. You have to be very serious kind of thing. So you can act very Christian. That's something you can do.
しかもいいクリスチャン。
And you can act like a really good Christian.
シェイムカントリーですからね。
Because it's a chain country, you can act very well.
でも海外でクリスチャンになった人はそこがちょっと壊れてる。
But people who have been overseas, they're not able to do that so well anymore.
特にアメリカなんかに来たら思ってることを言うっていうのがすごい励まされますよね。
Especially if they've been in America, they'll just kind of blurt out what they're feeling or thinking, and that's an encouragement to them to do
今
that.
さっきの武士道と全く反対な人がいる。
Exact opposite of the Bushido that some people are earlier.
で帰ってきてでも思ってることを言うんですよ。
But they go back to Japan, and the things that they're thinking about, they just say.
教会に来ながらもう神様いないとか言うんですよ。
So they might go into a church and say, I don't feel like God's around. Does God really exist?
もう夫婦関係を思いっきりしたとかですね。
We just had, my wife and I had this big fight.
でもそこで神様がいるってところに教会の中で出会うときにその今まで長い間クリスチャンだった人たちも 自分が思ってることを言うことになるかもしれない。
But perhaps because somebody comes from overseas and is willing to be honest about those kinds of things and blurt it out, right? Other people in the church who haven't been overseas might feel more willing to talk about some of the stuff that they're struggling with.
これはもう私の想像の中ですけれども、でもやっぱ海外で異文化を体験しているものは違うものを悪いものも時々あるけど、日本に持って帰れるんじゃないかなと。
So I'm just still thinking this through, but it feels like those who are saved overseas when they go back to Japan, they can bring these kinds of positive things that can help change. Well, they might bring some bad things too, but some good things to help change the church in Japan in some way, shape, or form.
だからわざわざ海外に連れてってきてるのかな
And perhaps that's one reason why God chose to bring them to faith while they were overseas as well.
で、あと今さっきケンセイ君言ってたんですけども、海外で寄留者としてクリスチャンになったので、日本に帰った時に日本にたくさんいる寄留者に届くことができる福音を伝える人になる。
So we talked about this too, that they're sojourners, right? That's an Abrahamic term, if you will. Sojourners here, Peter uses it as well too. So as sojourners, they come back to Japan, they can reach out to other sojourners from perhaps other countries while they're in Japan.
日本の国はそれをするのはあまり上手じゃない。
And Japanese aren't really good at welcoming foreigners.
今ね、フィリピン人の人たちにリーチャート、でもフィリピン人はフィリピン人のグループで行ってしまってるけど、なかなかそのね、日本の教会とつながるっていうのがうまくできない。
So that's true too. So like Philippine churches, there are Filipino churches in Japan, but the Filipino churches don't have a lot to do with Japanese churches. There's not a lot of connectivity at all there.
でも今はもうね、そのミックスって言われてる、その本当にハーフじゃない、ダブルじゃない、もうそういうね、いろんなこう、なんていう
International marriages or
そうそうそう。
children from international marriages.
2世とか2世もいるし、ミックス、なんていうんだったっけ？
ハ
ハーフじゃないの、ダブルじゃなくて、
ハーフ
忘れちゃったけど、ミックスだったかな。あ、ミックスルーツミックス、なんかそういう言葉があったらしいんですけど。
Okay. So you also have the families that come out of international marriages, and not just Japanese American, but even in Japan, Filipino now, and others as well.
だからそういう人たちも、だからなんか違いを受けるってことに対して帰国者を用いられるんじゃないかなと思います。
So for the Japanese Christians to start learning to accept people who are different like them, maybe the Japanese who are saved overseas can be a catalyst to start that process.
One of the things we were talking about is the coming back into all the churches I served at in Japan when they worshipped. It was Japanese music and English music, and when people would bring Japanese who never went over abroad, no interest in international things, there they say this is foreign. This is not for me. So how to reach beyond the big cities and beyond the international flavor Japanese.
Yeah. I don't know about others, but for our ministry, there are exceptions. Most of the people that come may have come from smaller areas, smaller towns and things like that to study in Boston. But when they go back, where did they end up? Not where they came from. They end up in Tokyo, maybe Osaka, maybe Nagoya, big cities. They're not going to go back to their smaller hometown. Like I was in Wakayama, Hashimoto-shi, Hashimoto-shi, or Osaka, or maybe go out to Tokyo. So that's another dynamic. Once they're overseas, they tend to end up in the big urban areas and not where they started from.
それは本当に、it's ongoing challenge.
I'm sorry, this is your seminar.
No, we can team.
We did this last year too in Seattle.
One crazy idea that I kind of have is, and don't get me wrong, but getting rid of the church. All right, and let me explain. Because what we've been talking about is we have Western church in Japan.
Yeah.
Western church meaning we sing a couple worship songs, we give offering, the pastor preaches, and then, benediction, you go home. But like you said, when Japanese people go, that's Western church.
Right.
And the Bible never told us to have services where you sing a few songs and give offering. They told there's a different model of church.
Sure.
And in one way, I was talking to some other pastors. What was it?
Yeah.
I was talking to some other pastors, and they were telling, this is a real big problem, but 50 to 60% of all pastors in Japan will be gone within 10 years or so because everyone's like in their 70s. But I'm thinking rather than that's a bad thing, maybe God is doing something different. Rather than having Japanese churches with Japanese pastors in a Western style, maybe we need a new movement to not replace that, but
Together.
New wineskin, yeah. And Western churches have their place, TBCs and the other churches, but maybe we don't need as many Western style churches, and maybe there's a new movement that God is trying to do because all the Japanese pastors are disappearing. That's just a thought.
Disappearing, moving to heaven.
Moving to heaven.
Ken Sensei, I think the time is over, but I gotta say this. So Ken Sensei was talking about, even in Japan, people get baptized, about 7,000 people a year. But the 1% doesn't change. Of course, a lot of people are, moving to heaven, but still, it's not growing because 2/3 of the people are getting out of the church. The backsliders. And it's the same thing with
Backslider is a very negative term.
Be sure.
They go out the back door of the church. But that's true. Japanese churches have a huge back door. They have one fight with the pastor and they quit. And Japanese people don't usually go to another church. They just say, it's going to be me and God.
So they're like, they might not go to the church, but then their faith might be not strong, but they're still there. And, I was listening to one of the guys preach, and he said, the 1% we've been talking about for like 40, 50 years, that's God's thing. He said that I changed the perspective of it. How can a person, or how can human keep 1% all those years? It either disappears or goes up a little, but it's always 1%. And he thought, this is God thing. And God is doing something. これはね、長澤隆が言ってた。
Oh, okay. Misa sensei has the same view.
Maybe 北海道の先生がそう言ってるかもしれない。でも、like Michi is saying, maybe the time is coming, and all those people who have been saved already, but maybe not they're active in church activities. ごめんなさいね。でもそれはあるかもしれない。でね、who knows? But I do pray that those ministries that we're doing here, these are not in vain, guys. I mean, these are God is definitely at work. So one thing that I wanted to do was just to encourage each other and keep on doing and keep on making disciples, not the churchgoers, because they will go to church if that's where the worship is taking place. But we have to build the disciples of Christ. So let me pray. Heavenly Father, we are so grateful for your love, your just your heart for Japan, and for those people who are here to have hearts for you and also for Japan. And I pray, Lord, that you will and I pray that you will continue to challenge us, encourage us, and show us your heart, your desire. And may you continue to show your mercy for Japanese people. May you bring them to yourself. May you use us for that. And I just pray that however the shape or the way that it's going to look like, we just want to be open to you. We just want to be available to your ministry. So help us to be your servant. Thank you so much for your ongoing faithfulness and love for Japanese and also for the world. Help Japan to be the servant to share the gospel to the world. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. ありがとうございます。